Alright people, I'm finally bringing you the comparison video between these two Sprint Run Para 3s. The Blade HQ exclusive with DLC coated CPM M4 and black hardware with the natural G10 versus the Rex 45 burnt orange. Now before I give you my test results, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a sharpener on YouTube and partial blacksmith. Goes by the name of Big Brown Bear. He posted his video of the comparison during the time I was waiting for the Rex 45 to be delivered to me. When I seen his video and I seen the results that he got, I was very shocked. I was like quite shocked that Rex 45 was able to blow M4 out of the water. And I think I could shine a little bit of light on that. See, there's a video on my channel of me digging, carving through 2x4 board with the M4, and then afterwards slicing paper afterwards. What I didn't show in that video was that the edge suffered some rolling, and I thought to myself, you know what, that doesn't seem right for M4. Of course, this is my first knife I've ever owned and handled in M4 and was able to conduct the testing with. But yeah, even with that, I'm a bit of a steel geek. I like to get information on steels, even though I don't have knives with those steels. And the results I got with M4 doing that cutting test, carving through the 2x4, seemed a little bit strange that I was having it rolling. Then I conducted another test. I sharpened again, going through the second sharpening, cutting through, making like over 100 feet worth of cuts through fairly dense cardboard. And again, seen some edge roll, and I was like, you know what, this seems kind of weird. So after the third sharpening, I saw some better results with the edge. The edge held up a lot better than the first two sharpenings. And in my fourth sharpening of the M4 to do the comparison with the Rex, that's when I saw the optimal performance of M4. So between Big Brown Bear's test, doing his with the brass rod, comparing the two, and what results I got with the edge after the first and second sharpening of the M4, I'm starting to realize that there could be a couple of these Blade HQ exclusives in the DLC coated M4 that has some tempering issues. Not quite sure if it's the steel that's been overheated or if it's the edge. In my particular case, it pretty much came up to, with the amount of resharpening that it took before it was performing perfectly. Seemed like the edge was overheated on this one, or something of the like. So, another thing to mention is that, alright, like I've said in my previous videos, Rex 45 is a cobalt enriched version of M3. Now, if you look at the compositions, they're virtually identical with the exception of a few things. Now, in terms of vanadium, M4 has a little more vanadium than Rex. In terms of tungsten, Rex has a little more tungsten than M4. But the big difference is being the 8% cobalt. Now, cobalt, for those of you who don't know that are watching this video, cobalt can do two things. Will do two things. First thing, so you could bring the steel to higher temperatures without increasing the brittleness. So you could achieve higher hardness without having to worry about brittleness during the quench. The second thing is that cobalt acts like somewhat of a steroid to each individual composite within the steel's matrix. Therefore, the effects and the attributes of the composites are somewhat increased with the help of the cobalt. But I still said with Big Brown's test, it just didn't make much sense to me that the Rex 45 would just blow M4 out of the water. But I think that is the case with a couple, if not more than a couple, of these Blade HQ exclusives, that the M4 has some tempering issues. Like I said, took 4 sharpenings. This is the 4th sharpening of the M4, and now the steel is performing beautifully. Now, let me talk a little bit more about the Rex. Now, Rex is that type of steel where if you look at the composites and then you also look at the fact that it has that much cobalt in it, 8%, it gives the maker of whoever's making a knife out of this steel, gives them some versatility. You can either get it to slightly higher Rockwell than M4, and it could have a fighting chance with M4 in terms of a toughness test, or you could bump up the hardness a couple of notches and trade in some of that toughness for more wear resistance. And that's what that's the type of things that you can expect with Rex 45 should you get a bar stock in this steel. Now, onto my results with the testing. The first thing I did was did a cardboard test to test wear resistance. Now, this cardboard is single corrugated. I was going against the grain, and yeah, basically testing wear resistance. It's fairly tough cardboard, not incredibly tough cardboard, but has a hard shell, hard exterior with a single corrugation. Now, the benchmark for all my testing was to continue to test until one would no longer be able to whittle hair. The next test was a wood test. We're testing tough, a little bit more on the tougher side now. Toughness test. Now, at first I started using wood knots, and then afterwards kind of said it was taking too long. But then again, you can't expect anything else with a high-speed steel and one that's a cobalt enriched version of a high-speed steel, because I used to do a little bit of wood chiseling, woodcraft, and all the premium wood chisel sets were always made out of high-speed steel. So yeah, after a bit of going through the wood test, I was a quarter of the wood test, I was like, yep, this is going to take a lot longer than the cardboard test for sure. So I went from going through the pine knots that I had in my possession. Then afterwards I switched on over to a couple of pieces of the over a century old wooden barn board that I have. Going along the grain, carving along the sides, going with the grain. And then I was like, you know what, forget this. I just switched from that to now doing press cuts, going against the grain. And even with that, it was still taking some time. And I knew I was in it for the long haul with these two. So, without further ado, here's my test results. I have my scorecard here. So, in the slow wear resistance test, which is the cardboard test, Rex 45 scored 294 inches before it would stop whittling hair, and the M4 tested a score of 273 inches. So Rex was the winner of the wear resistance test with the cardboard. Now, in terms of the wood testing, now combining the not carving and shaving with the over century-old pieces of barn board carving and press cuts, Rex 45 had a total of 75 cuts through the wood and wood knots combined. 75 cuts before it would stop whittling hair. The M4 scored a 96. I mean, sorry, not 96, 76. So M4 was the winner of the toughness test. Well, the wood test, which is basically a toughness test. So that's it. In terms of wear resistance, Rex 45 had the edge over the M4, but in the wood test, M4 had the edge over it. So that's it, folks. Now, in terms of what I was touching on earlier about these Blade HQ exclusives, possibly like a couple of them going through some tempering issues. Yeah, if you had no choice, if you were, say you were a user right now and you had no choice but to go to the secondary market for either one of these, if you're an end user that just simply enjoys knives, and when it needs to be sharpened, you take it back to the manufacturer or you take it to a trusted sharpener, just to avoid the hassle that I and Big Brown Bear had gone through with the M4, Rex 45 is your winner in that purchase. Now, if you're a sharpener, you sharpen knives, you use knives, you know what stones and plates to use when it comes to sharpening tough steels and high carbide steels, and those in between, you know which stones and plates to use for all of those, and you don't mind going through a little bit of hassle, putting in a little bit more work to sharpen, you can't really go wrong with either one. And that's the end of the video. Alright people, I'm out.